Hey guys, and welcome back to another round of Let's Make Hybrids, a series dedicated to various artworks and small creations created by the community based on animal hybrid prompts. Last week we did Komodo dragons and orc whales, and this week we've been playing with cobras and lionfish. And would you believe it, we have even more submissions than we have done the last few times. Not only that, I'll be honest, I've been so excited looking at everyone else's submissions, I had actually forgotten to do my own. I am sorry about that. I promise you it will not happen again. But like I said, there are so many other artworks, the sheer variety in mediums, styles, genres, colours, depictions. We have plenty of artwork to satisfy you. So, for our very first one, by Top Shelf Gravy is a spore creation, a bit of a simple one that focuses more on the lionfish design. It's got some sharp whiskers or maybe even teeth and that piercing orange eyes, large appendages and a long snake-like tail. I really like the features around the eyes. Next up we have Sarek with a Roblox creation. Now I don't know much about Roblox, so it is difficult for me to appreciate how much work went into this, though I do commend for the use of another game engine that isn't just Spore. At the very least, I do like the bright, bold summer colours and the little appendages around the tail, the back, and of course around the eyes. Next up we got a traditional drawing by Mihal. Now this one gives me some really big Monster Hunter vibes. It kind of reminds me of like Legiagrus and a bit of Beotodus as well. I'm kind of imagining that the large frontal fins are almost strong enough to propel it forward. I really like all the ridges around the body and the appendages. This one's got like a very nice armoured appearance. And the different dimensions and angles are really cool as well. Next up is StrangeBirrb from Jinan. A far more snake-looking interpretation with some nice simple lionfish appendages around the back. But if we look ahead to the next image, you'll see it fighting a Mangousunagi, which is a mongoose eel hybrid of their own. I gotta say, I do really like these kaiju renders. They just feel like really old school kaijus and it's really quite charming. Especially the added detail to the spore creation that you can see within Blender. Next up is a sweet pencil sketch by Clover Sage. I really like the shading technique for the stripes and I like just the overall kind of hatchy style with them. Also the nice defined eye, and the spine or sail going down the tail is actually quite interesting as well. Very broad as opposed to the hood, which is a little bit spiky. And next up we've got a casual German Shepherd with what to me looks like a very Aztec-y, I guess kind of hieroglyphic type of style here. The way they portrayed this one, it really makes you think of something you'd see like in an ancient temple. Some kind of ancient mythical creature. I think a lot of that is to do with how it's facing forwards but the head is off to the side. I kind of hope you guys know what I'm referring to here. But either way, it looks really cool. I like the design and I really like the style of the hood. Very large and spiky. Really gives like a very dominant appearance. Following up is the plant guy with another small creation. I really like the design on this one. I like just how clean and smooth it is. I've mentioned before and I'll mention again, it can be quite tricky to create nice striking colours in Spore, and I feel like the plant guy's done a very good job of that here. I also like the way that they've done the hood, how it kind of stops midway through the appendages of the lionfish. And how it's got another row of appendages going down the centre as well, so it's got 3 in total. It makes it look very large and grand. Also, as a personal preference, I also really like the appendages coming off the chin. It kind of reminds me of a catfish. And next up, we've got another spore creation by Dinogris. Now this one gives me a far more abyssal leviathan kind of vibe. The face looks mean, I like the striking white stripes. And if we focus on the bottom right hand image, Dinogris explained how that was meant to be the view from below. So imagine as if you were a small creature in the ocean, you look above and you just see this very large mass above you with the red rings and the white spikes. That would certainly be intimidating, and I think it's a really cool concept. Coming up next is the StrangeBirrb with this beautifully vibrant and colourful piece. I really love the texture that they used for the stripes. It's got like a bit of a painty texture despite it being digital. It really reminds me of just traditional acrylic paint. I think it's a really cool texture and style, and I love how much they're integrating and overlapping all the different shades and colours. I also really like the face, and the eyes are really nicely done as well. And I just noticed actually one of the appendages around the eyes are broken off. Oh, poor thing. But I absolutely adore the colour scheme. I think it's so bright, so vibrant, so varied, and just really well done. And following StrangeBirrb is Pop Culture with another gorgeous colourful piece. This one here has much more wintry colours, and I'd like to draw attention to the different types of patterns and stripes, particularly when you look at the face, the hood, the back tails and quills, and of course the rest of the body. It's really cool to see just, you know, how much thought has gone into the variation of stripes and how they don't really follow just one or two particular patterns, but they are all their own independent patterns. And speaking of which, also different colour schemes in different segments as well. It really makes each independent feature like really pop out more. And I would also like to give a bit of a note to the background as well. One, I like the way that the main focus is on the creature and it contrasts very nicely with the rest of the background, but also two little doodles in the background, all the different sort of like perspectives and expressions, they're fantastic. I also really like the whiskers around the eyes as well, really subtle but actually quite elegant. And also from pop culture, it's a page of various doodles, a lot of information, something I'd recommend pausing and reading. It just goes into a bit more information of the Leofell that we've just seen, and it's wonderful seeing the thought process that goes into this kind of stuff. Like I said, give it a pause and take a read. Coming up next is 2 submissions by Caliber Light. So the first one here is looking like a much more kind of aggressive, more predatory type of Cobra Lionfish. I get that vibe from all the much spiky appendages, and of course, you know, the great big teeth and the open mouth charging after that poor little squid there. I also really like the long serpentine body, it really gives the idea of a large leviathan predator. And if we compare this one to Caliber Light's second submission, this one's looking a lot cuter, but it also kind of reminds me more of an elegant sort of regal design, such as a Chinese dragon. Maybe even a bit more like a Quetzalcoatl. I believe it's because of the way that every feature just kind of has like a bit of a swell, bit of a flick. It just makes everything seem a bit more wavy as opposed to spiky, and it gives a much more regal, almost godlike appearance. The big eyes as well kind of show me wisdom as opposed to, you know, something predatory. Here we have another small creation by Frost Dragon 3851. Now for this one, really pay attention to the hood and the back of the sail. One thing I really like about this one is the addition of using the light coloured nail downs, which transition into these much darker spikes. And what that displays is that the sails and the hoods have this very light coloured membrane, which then transitions into darker spikes, which is something you see a lot in nature, but it's really quite tricky to pull off in Spore. This is very, very creative and definitely something I'd like to do myself actually. That's a really cool transition of colours, not to mention the rest of the colour palette is really cool, and I like the overall posturing as well, gives it a bit of character, but mate, the back sail in particular, I really, really like the breaking colour. I think that's very clever. And coming up next, we have an ink drawing by Shotgun Dorito. For this one, we've got a beautifully brightly coloured lionfish patterned cobra with a bit more of a spikier hood than usual, emerging out of a vase in an Egyptian setting, which I have to say I am quite the sucker for. But in all seriousness though, I do like the originality of this design. I don't think we've really had any submissions at all that include a prop, so that is actually really cool to see and just gives it like a bit more of an extra dynamic. Not to mention the patterning on the prop as well, in this case a vase, is also very nicely done. I think it's a really cool original idea and something about it is just really cute. It's very simple but really, really effective. And up next is what appears to be another Egyptian themed hybrid, the Lobra by Doubled Fern. At least I think it's Egyptian hybrid. It looks to have a lot of gold and royal blue stripe colours. Also the hood itself sort of looks like one of those head crests that the old pharaohs would wear, which again is emphasised by the royal blue, the royal purple and the yellowish gold. For the Lobra they've gone with a much more Cobra heavier design, but you can still appreciate the bit of lionfish details in the stripes, in the tip of the tail, and the appendages running down the spine. Next up we got a bit of a study by Snowball. The one on the left is giving me some serious Monster Hunter vibes. There is that one monster whose name constantly escapes me. It's a newly editioned one, it's got a really crazy big eyes. I'm sure a lot of you know what I mean just by that description. It's got a really freaky face. And all of the faux eyes that you can see in this one, both in the appendages and in the hood, really reminds me of that. It's almost mesmerising, if not a little bit unsettling, and I think that'd be a very cool and powerful type of intimidation display. But as we move on to the right side, it's interesting to see Snowball's take and decisions as to whether it have fangs or all teeth, how the frills will look like from the side, and whether it behaves like a mane or perhaps like the hood of a frilled lizard. As always, it's cool to see the thought that goes into these. Next up we have one of various inspiration by Caprasuchus93. Their inspiration being the Grabnedi from Jurassic Park, Project Evolution, Mordair from Genesis, SCP-3000 and a Spinosaurus. I can definitely see the Mordair inspiration in particular. And definitely a little bit of the Spino in relation to the tail. I think a lot of us have been doing that recently and I really can't blame any of us. It's interesting to see the large split jaw in this one, and also all the various different approaches and different parts used for the various quills, hoods, sails, and fins. Also the small red crest on the forehead is a rather nice touch. I'm quite a fan of the various uses of parts here. It just overall gives a lot to look at, a lot to study, especially around the back. Next up we have a digital piece by Known Yenna. First of all, I really like the setting and the colour scheme. But in particular, I like the differentiation between all of the appendages and sail going around from the neck to the back to the tail. I think what a lot of us would do is connect that entire area as one large membrane, So it's cool to see Nonyena focus on, you know, 3 different pieces here. You've got the front half, which is more of a sail, the middle area around the spine between the 2 sets of fins, which looks just more like spikes or appendages, and of course the very large paddle-like tail, of which the stripe pattern varies compared to the sail along the back of the neck. So it's cool to see the extra variety got into this one, and also the purple stripy tongue. That's a cute little touch. Coming up next, we have 2 submissions by Grimgar. So the first one here makes me think of a Quetzalcoatl. It looks very flowy, very soft, almost feather-like. So I can imagine this one being a rather graceful swimmer in the water. Additionally, the little diamond shapes along the back of the neck and the pattern of the stripes really makes me think of something a bit more on the deity side. Whereas if we compare that to Grimgar's second attempt, this one gives me much more of a graceful sea creature vibe. I mean, of course, sea creature, it being part lionfish, but this one, just with the way that the fins and the sails have been kind of tipped off at the end there, it gives the idea of like a very large, majestic, almost seahorse or sea dragon kind of creature. But the little circles give me the impression of either like a coral kind of colour scheme, or maybe even something bioluminescent. Following Grimgar is Morgan Snack with a Spore Creation submission. First of all, make credits to the asymmetrical posing, always such a pain. I also like the nice dent striping, really shows lionfish. I quite like the design of the hood. I can see there's a bit of a combination between the large spiky appendages interlocked with the fin parts, which all in combination create a nice large hood. And then of course, additional spiky parts for the appendages all around the body. I also really like the large piercing eyes, they really sell Cobra. And coming up next is a rather interesting medium by Glad to be Chillin'. Now this one clearly was a pencil sketch on paper, but I've kind of gone over it in digital, but only at low opacity. And I have to admit, it gives a very, very interesting overall appearance. I don't think I've ever really seen before digital done on striped paper like this, at least not, you know, with some very light opacity, and it really does create like an interesting overall vibe, especially in conjunction with the shading and the very piercing light highlights. Yeah, like I said, it just gives like something very, very unique. I also love the design of the face. The face gives me a bit of a really old school traditional Japanese dragon design. And of course, let's not miss the various appendages coming out from the face, the gorgeous mane of the hood, and all the lovely stripes. This one's very stylized and it's really quite satisfying to look at. Next up we have Swaggy Tracks with this very intimidating looking one. This one I can imagine having either a very intimidating or even a somewhat mesmerizing display. In particular, the eyes inside the hood and all the stripy appendages would really make for one crazy display. This is like Cobra just ranked up to 11 in a really cool way. And while rather subtle, I do like how they've added some appendages around the stomach or neck, depending on what you'd call it, the inner part of the hood, as well as the side of the body and the tail. It's got quite a nice healthy variety without it being too overpowering. Up next is Xeris with this really awesome and bright coloured one. Again, gives me a lot of Aztec-y vibes. I think it may be due to the appendages on the forehead that kind of remind me a little bit of feathers. I really like the colour palette on this one. We've had a fair few reds and yellows, but the addition of the black or more like dark grey kind of body really makes it pop out a bit more, and especially makes the display of the hood really shine out. You can tell that's the main focus of the creature. The stripes themselves also have a very nice colour scheme, and I just really love the display of the hood. I love the patterns and the kind of faux eyeballs inside. It's almost kind of like a really angry peacock, and I absolutely love it. Next up, we got a pencil sketch by Godzilla King 5678. Quite an interesting posture here with the way he's displayed his creature. What I really like is the alternating patterns going along the scales. We have strong, bold, vertical stripes going along the forehead, into a very scaly face, into horizontal stripes going along the hood, clean, divine stripes for the back, a dark palette for the midsection, and very large plated scales for the underbelly. It's really interesting to see all the various patterns and designs just for the overall covering of the creature. Also how it's got a bit of a mohawk of appendages and membrane, very nicely matching that of the hood, and a cool design on the end of the tail. There's quite a fair bit of nuance in this one. Next up we have another creature of an intimidating display by Benny. In particular, I really like the mouth on this one. Not just the fact that it's a very, you know, wide agape mouth like some snakes have, but also just the way it's drawn. The 3D-ness and almost blockiness of it, there's just something very interesting and captivating about that. I also like the variation of the appendages around the hood as well, and they sort of tip off onto a much larger surface area. And I'd also like to give credit to the way that they've shaded and intertwined the colours, and also the way it's hiding behind a rock. It kind of makes me imagine that it is lunging out in surprise. Maybe it's a threat display, maybe to defend itself. It is a really cool one. Next up is a pencil sketch by Null000. I love the way it is hissing at the viewer. There's just something about the overall dynamic of the face, seeing the eyes kind of piercing through, its mouth wide agape. It looks really intimidating, and I think this is just very, very well done. I also love the appendages or fins coming out from behind the hood, almost behind where the ears would be. It looks really cool in conjunction with the hood. It just makes the creature look much larger and scarier. I would love to see a real Cobra of that, I really and truly would. That'd be amazing, if not terrifying. It's also nice to have a bit of a comparison to the bottom right sketch. Just to see how everything kind of folds back, folds down, and just to see how when it's swimming, it would swim like a regular water snake. It'd be very thin and quite graceful, but on display, very intimidating. Coming up next is a rather interesting sport creation by Maver. Now for the creation itself, it's got quite a few subtle details, in particular little flecks of appendages coming out from around the eyebrows and around the midsection or the belly. There's also some very subtle definition around the lips, if you will, around the snake mouth, which is really nice and clearly defined. And I also really like the large wispy, I guess, whiskers in a way coming out from below. And in particular, what's been really interesting about this one is the way that they've just turned the entire creation and just kind of shifted the entire thing all into a great big long snake. Now it may be a simple technique, but it's one that's very creative, and I don't think we've really seen any spore creations actually modified like this. So I really like the creativity. Speaking of creativity, Maver did submit a second creation, which is that of a 1967 Shelby Cobra and the USS Lionfish submarine. Now, this is not what I had in mind of hybrids, but I must really commend his creativity and imagination on this one. Like, you got me, well done. But also the actual effort that went into the creation itself. Now, I'm not very good when it comes to vehicles, but I really can appreciate, you know, how hard it is to get like a nice, smooth, consistent form. Certain subtle details, making the overall vehicle kind of look complete is kind of tricky in sport, I find, and I think Maver's done a very good job here. Also of combining a land vehicle and a sea vehicle into this one hybridized concept. Well played, mate, well played. Coming up next is this beautiful piece by Gabrielle BF. Now while it is absolutely beautiful, the face really catches me off guard. The face does look kind of mean and angry. Despite it having like all these really beautiful bright colours, the pinks, the reds, it looks very warm and inviting until you see that face that really catches you. Although saying that, I do love how the tongue transitions from blue to purple to pink. The little eyebrow appendages as well are a nice touch. I absolutely love the style gone into the fringe and frills. Very nice, long, thin pieces. And in particular the tail. The tail is a very, very interesting design. I imagine it would be quite transparent, or perhaps it could be just a collection of long hair-like strands. I'm not sure, but either way, it's a really, really cool design. And I will say that the fact that they've highlighted it with a, you know, a large blue outline around the tail, it just highlights it really well. I can't really say much more than that. I just really like how it looks. Coming up next is a very large and epic looking Leviathan piece by Anonyma. At least I assume it's a Leviathan, it looks like it would be massive. I really, really like the transparency in the hood as well as the fins and frills. Just a subtle light blue really adds so much to this. I can imagine this creature being quite adept at camouflage, or perhaps it just makes itself seem smaller than it really is. But like I said, I imagine this being such a large and probably very graceful creature. I also really like the design of the face. It kind of looks like a bit like a barracuda to me. In fact, the more I look at the face, the more details and features kind of just reveal themselves, such as the blue frills and fins kind of at the back of the jaw, the multiple layers of teeth inside the mouth, all the subtle stripes along the face, and the two little appendages behind the large whisker ones. There's a lot to take in with this one, and I also really like the colour palette as well. I think all the different shades of light and dark brown really complement each other, in addition to the semi-transparent look. Next up we have a Liobra by Randle. And this one, they state, is related to the Reaper Leviathan, and you know what? I can kind of see the resemblance. Now what really gets me about this descendant of the Reaper Leviathan is the fact that it is able to generate a status energy ball in its mouth like the status rifle. Now that sounds really cool, and I would hate to see that in the game. Oh, just imagine that, that'd be awful and really, really fantastic. Now in terms of design, this one I feel does look a little bit simple, but I can imagine it kind of developing in the deep, dark depths of the ocean, where creatures do tend to look a little bit more alien and a little bit more simplified, especially with strange colour palettes like pink. So with that in mind, imagine this creature lurking somewhere such as the blood kelp biomes, the pink to match the blood oil, or the paleness of the kelp. That would be terrifying. And next up we've got one by Atix. First of all, mate, I commend you on the scale work. That is crazy, and I love the dedication. I love the piercing blue eyes. It's really cool how they contrast so heavily against the rest of the creature. And speaking of which, I also really like the subtle purple stripes along the rest of the body. It's subtle, but you notice it kind of breaks apart the red quite a bit. I really like the tattered design of the hood. It kind of gives like a bit of an in-betweener between a Cobra hood and a fin of a fish. And all the nice clean spines with a bit of white speckles on it. And coming up next is a sport creation by Danny DLM. So for this one, I feel like they've gone much more into the lionfish route. So far, we've been seeing a lot of long, elegant serpentine creatures, whereas lionfish themselves are quite chunky, and I feel like Danny DLM has really hit that on the head here. This one is by far more dominant on the lionfish side, but with a long serpentine tail, of course, and a much more reptilian head. I also like how they've intertwined different parts into the appendages, how they've taken the exoskeleton limb part and tipped it off in either the phineus part, I believe it's called, and the whipwicks. It's a very interesting transition. I think it's quite cool. And coming up next is the Mono Cobra by Thoughtmeister. Now, some of you may have actually seen this one on Reddit. Thoughtmeister had posted this one on the Monster Hunter subreddit and it went wild, so mate, congratulations. And you know what? I can really see why. I adore just the variations of stripes here. The design of the hood is very unique in the way that it kind of follows the shape of the hood, but it's very broken apart, and the color palette completely differs from the rest of the body. The tail as well looks really, really cool, very large and intimidating. That'd make for a really cool display. Or if it's a water type monster, it would be really good for certain water-based attacks, I can imagine. Also the spikes and armor plating around the hip or shoulder, depending on what way you're looking at it, that really sells Monster Hunter fantastically. I love the face. The face just kind of looks very determined, which is a very fitting look for a Monster Hunter creature. Overall, for a monster design, I think this is very, very well executed, very clean, very original, and I think it looks fantastic. And again, mate, congratulations. Personally, I'd love to see this in 3D. Up next is another digital piece by Little Theropod. Now, first things first, that face is terrifying in the best way. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The inside of creature mouths kind of freak me out a little bit, and I think you've done a damn fantastic job. It is just the right amount of freaky, and I can really, really appreciate that. A lot of detail's gone on there, and I think it's really fantastic. I love the ripped, tattered membrane going along from the chin to the neck, down to the body. The texture on that is really cool. And I really want to pay attention here to the stripes, to the patterning along the body. How they've gone from a very giraffe-dominant kind of pattern with the head, which then transitions into stripes with very beautiful gradients along the midsection of the body. And as it goes closer to the tail, the coloration of the stripes kind of reverse, and it becomes a lot more white dominant. And then we get to the tip of the tail, to the barbs and the appendages, and it just looks very clean and toned down. The overall transitioning of the stripes along the entire body is very, very clean, very well executed, and I think that just deserves a lot of credit. Not to mention the patterning around the different appendages and frills and the hood as well, I think is also another very unique design. Again, very nicely done. I love how this has got like a very kind of torn appearance to it, which is actually very fitting for a lionfish. I did feel like that with the sheer amount of appendages that a lionfish has, not all of them would be clean and pristine. I think that this here is like a very good reflection of that. Next up we have this piece by SB. Now, I really like the colour scheme on this one. We've had a fair few pinks and reds, but the additional blue on this, and just where the blue is, much smaller highlights just here and there as opposed to a dominant feature, it just gives it a really nice patterning that ever so slightly makes it pop out, but there's nothing too overpowering. I think there's just the right amount of blue and just the right amount of contrast to really make this creature pop out more. I also love the design of the hood and how the numerous different frills kind of match that style as well. Gives like a bit of a draconic feel, and also the way that the frills, fins and hoods all have their own independent patterns as well. Also, given the beach setting, I really can imagine these kind of creatures wandering on the beach. I think that the pale colour scheme is a really good job for matching, you know, a nice sandy environment. It's a really nice and clean design. Coming up next, we've got a sport creation by Vianesh. Now, what really stands out to me of this creation is the textures. The textures just sell so much of this creature. The bump mapping and the general overlapping designs. It does such a great job of exposing and intensifying certain bits of information around the stripes, around the patterns. I also like how it's gone with a bit more of a fishy head style as well. We've been seeing a lot of snake and reptilian heads. It's cool to see a fishier take. I also really like the choice of the colour scheme. I feel like trading out the typical lionfish white for more of a kind of murky blue is a really nice touch. I can imagine it's camouflaging quite well because of that, or at least appearing smaller than it really is. Also great work on the distribution of the appendages too. Next up, we've got a sketch by DrakeLord30. A very nice and clean, simple design here. I really like just how well defined the stripes are. You can see that he's gone into a lot of effort of really defining the nice clean stripes in his drawing. I also like the design of the fins along the head and the tail. It gives like a bit of a spiderweb kind of appearance, which I think is a first. I'd also like to pay some attention to the upper and lower ridges along this creature. From what I can tell, judging by the 3D of the stripes here, is that the midsection of body is as a typical width and weight that you'd expect, but it kind of feels like that the top and the bottom kind of taper off into a bit of a thinner tip. It's a very interesting design, and I feel like that the way that the stripes are so defined really gives it like a bit of a 3D look to it. Following Drakelord is Arcane with this adorable design here. Another more simple one with a lot to tell, and first of all, love the blep. Second of all, love the cup of tea. I also like these strong lightning strike kind of stripy patterns here, and the blue fins and frills accompanying the head, and I like how they've got like this bit of a spiky, jagged black appearance to them. In fact, all of the jagged and spiky parts really kind of give me a bit of a lightning vibe, which is now making me think of this as some kind of electric eel, or just generally a creature that can generate an electric charge, which is really quite interesting. It'll do a great job of heating up his own cup of tea, I'll tell you that. Coming up next is this dark and mysterious piece by Taroz. I really like the head on the upper left hand corner. Just something about the overall design, the proportions, the shape, just generally how it was drawn, I think looks absolutely fantastic. Also the fact that it's got like a bit of a hole around the membrane between the mouth is kind of creepy, but really quite interesting. But again, I just really love the definition of it. Also the very subtle scales along the hood. They're still focused on the upper left hand corner. They're very subtle but do add quite a nice bit of detail and depth, which I think is a very nice touch. I love the overall flow on the right hand side. Seeing all the different features kind of overlap and splay out, and how you can really see the lighter colours below still kind of flare out as well, which is really nice. There's a lot of different dimensions and dynamics to this one, and I think Taroz has done a very fantastic job of really defining it in the 3 different sketches here. Now Taroz has also added in this Beastars manga piece here. I'll have to admit I really don't know what Beastars is, so I can't really appreciate this very much, but I can at least say that I really like the design of the head and all the different stripes. I think those were all very nicely done. I really like the style on the face and the head overall, just the overall curvature and such. It looks really cool. Alright then, ladies and gents, and we are done for our current round. First of all, I do want to apologise for how long this has taken to get out. It has been very difficult trying to record, so thank you for your patience. And part 2 will be coming out as soon as I possibly can, along with the next prompt. As always everyone, thank you all so much for your participation, for your enthusiasm, for taking part. This has been really cool, really awesome, and the entire project just makes me very happy. Thank you all so much, and I'll catch you on part 2 as soon as I possibly can. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers.